hear you a little more, okay?
Okay.
All right.
So maybe Lydia, come a little closer.
You're on, though. You're on, okay. And you're on TV, too. So smile, smile. Okay.
Still, you got chosen. I told you that.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2020 annual meeting of the Hollis School District. My name is Drew Mason, and I am the district moderator. I call this meeting to order. I invite all who are able to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for our national anthem, sung by students at the Hollis Primary School, Lydia Peterson, Avery Spence, Amelia Hosking, and Ellen Torpy.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming, whose rough stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, streaming, and the rockets red glare, and some bursting in air, yea, flew through the night, that flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, ladies. Good job. Lydia Peterson, Avery Spence, Amelia Hosking, and Ellen Torpy. I would like to invite all serving members of our armed forces and all veterans to stand and be recognized. We thank you for your service. I have to turn it on. The school board chair, Rob Mann, will introduce the school board.
Okay. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to introduce members of the Hollis School Board. To my right, we have Tammy Freed, our vice chair, Brooke Arthur, our secretary, Carol Roy, and Amy Kellner, who could not be here tonight at the meeting.
I'd like to invite Budget Committee Chair Tom Guillen to introduce the Budget Committee.
Thank you. We've got Mike Harris, Darlene Mann, Chris Hyde, Tom Jambard, Mike Levitt, and Carol Roy from the school board serves as an ex officio member. Thank you.
I'd like to invite SAU Superintendent Corey to introduce the school staff.
I'd like to recognize Gina Bergskog, Assistant Superintendent, Bob Thompson, Assistant Superintendent, Kelly Seeley is our Business Manager, representing the Hollis School District, Candy Fowler, Principal of Hollis Upper Elementary, Nicole Tomaselli is our Curriculum Coordinator for the district, Ann Elser is our coordinator of special education, and Paula Isbicki is our principal at the primary school. Thank you.
Helping us tonight is our district council, James O'Shaughnessy, and our district clerk, Diane Levitt. We also have the supervisor of the checklist, and the ballot clerks are in the back of the room, and in the back corner are my assistants, Jim Belanger and Paul Armstrong. We are all concerned about COVID-19. Please know that your state and local officials at all levels are working as hard as they can to provide you with the most up-to-date information, advice, and recommendations about it. I would particularly like to thank Hollis town staff, election officials, and volunteers for their attention to appropriate procedures for the virus on short notice. There were 2 contested races on the election yesterday. On the vote for selectmen, Paul Armstrong and Susan Ben got the nod. For the zoning amendments, amendments 1 through 4 passed, and amendment 5 failed. There are still a number of meetings to go. Saturday, March 14th, is the Hollis Town meeting, which will be at 10 a.m. in the high school gym. And then the co-op annual meeting will be next week, Tuesday, and if we need a second night, Wednesday, again in the school gym. There are a number of ways that people can access this meeting besides attending. To watch it on TV, there's Charter Channel 191, TDS Channel 12, or you can live stream it directly from the SAU website. Also on the SAU website is the annual meeting warrant, a copy of this presentation, and a copy of the proposed budget. On the Hollis Town website, you can get a copy of the annual report, which contains the annual meeting warrants, at least as of press time, town and district proposed budgets, department, committee, and school reports, and all kinds of extra goodies. We are here tonight to discuss and decide on the subjects raised on the warrant by the school board. To do so effectively, we need rules. Rules must be set for each meeting so folks understand how to get things done. The proposed rules are available in your town report on page 205 in the yellow section. These are pretty much the same rules we have been using for the past several meetings, but I want to highlight a couple of things. If you wish to speak at the appropriate time, come to the microphone and show your card. Wait to be recognized by the moderator. Speak into the microphone. State your name and address clearly so the clerk can hear. Address the moderator, not the audience. Speak only once until others have spoken. Time is limited to 3 minutes. Organized presentations will be allowed up to 10. When your time is short, I will give you a signal. When you're out of time, I will give you another signal. If possible, be brief, be courteous, and discuss issues, not personalities. A motion to reconsider is useful and appropriate if new information comes to light. It can only be made by someone who voted on the prevailing side of a question to be reconsidered. A motion to restrict reconsideration is there to allow an issue to settle before any reconsideration can occur. It does not prevent reconsideration. Rather, it requires that if a subsequent motion to reconsider passes, the actual reconsideration of the question can only happen at least 7 days later. This is what the ballot looks like that we'll be using tonight. When you checked in, you should already have a copy. It's pretty simple format. Mark your vote yes or no and place it in the ballot box. When it's time to vote, we'll be using the ballot box in the back left corner. Many of the meeting rules are governed by state law. In the town report, I have indicated which laws may apply. Any ruling that is not governed by state law can be appealed to the voters. To do so, raise a point of order or a challenge. So shall the school district vote to adopt the rules for this meeting as proposed by the moderator? Is there a second? Second by Tammy Fareed. Is there a discussion of the rules? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the rules as proposed, please raise your cards. Thank you very much. All opposed? And the rules are adopted. We have a reasonably full warrant tonight, but I think that we can get done by 10 o'clock, if not a little bit earlier. Article 1 is a bond issue on the barn renovation, and we'll be voting that one on a secret ballot, and the polls will need to remain open for at least an hour. Article 2 is a contingent article if Article 1 fails to pass. Article 3 is a lease purchase agreement. Article 4 is a contingent article if Article 3 fails to pass. Article 5 is the second year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with the Hollis Education Staff Association. Article 6 is the SAU budget, which is also voted on by secret ballot. Articles 7 and 8 are maintenance funds for the SAU and school buildings. Article 9 is the Special Education Expendable Trust. Article 10 establishes the contingency fund for this coming school year. Article 11 allows the district to access catastrophic funds. Article 12 is the school budget, and Article 13 is any other business. Mr. Corey asked for a couple of minutes to speak.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank the school board and the budget committee, for their support. We have been working on these proposals since last July, and we are asking you to give them strong consideration and hopefully see fit to approve them tonight. I thank you for your community support during this time of the COVID-19 virus. I really appreciate the number of emails and communications that you have sent supporting us, and that is deeply appreciated by our teachers, our students, and our staff. Thank you.
Mr. Guillen. It's these 2 hours. Okay.
Thank you. For those that attended the public hearing, this will look very familiar. However, it is trimmed down significantly. Demographics, and again, I'm not going to go through every line item here, but just to kind of give a flavor of the demographics of the town, economic conditions, and so forth, kind of that are the context or the background for the decisions that we make or the recommendations. Population in Hollis is about 7,900. Has not really changed too much in the last 10 years or so. About 3,000 households with a median household income of just over $125,000. Well, you really got to be close to this. You will see throughout the presentation tax impacts on an average home. So the average home is $456,000. Slight increase from last year. Average tax bill was just over $10,500, a 7% increase from the prior year. This is the enrollment history and the forecast. The crossed hash or the slash bars are forecast. The solid bars are the history. You can see here, I guess local minimum, I don't know if 20 years ago is local at this point, but we peaked at 866 and saw a consistent downward trend in enrollment. And we've really been flat for the last 8 to 10 years. We are projected, and when I say the projections, I'm referring to NASDAQ, which is an organization that provides enrollment forecasts. We have found that those projections are very volatile. They change from year to year. They actually project 10 years out, and they caution themselves that those numbers are unreliable to some extent. So we see this year we had an enrollment of 644. The administration estimate for the coming year, fiscal year 21, which is the budget we're contemplating this evening, is 655 students. Again, my point here isn't to read off every number. It's simply to give a sense of the number of employees and types of employees of the Hollis School District. You see the two large groups at the top are teachers. They're covered by the Hollis Education Association Union. The next groups here, the support staff, are covered by the Hollis Education Support Staff Association. The second year of their contract is up for vote this evening. Nothing on the Education Association. And then we have various custodial staff and administrators. This takes a moment to orient. We've got two things going on here. The columns are the number of students. So this is the same data that I showed you 2 slides ago. Over the top here is a yellow line which represents the staff. And if you look in the early 2000s, we had a situation where staff was increasing significantly and enrollment was going down. One of the things that the Budget Committee has worked with the school district is, or with the school board rather, is to try to see if we can make those trends coincide a little bit more. Meaning if enrollment's going down, reasonably we should think that staffing is going down. Having said that, there are some positions that are not subject to the number of students. You need principals, you need custodians. Special education is not strictly correlated to the number of students, so you do see some variation there. But I think that we are pleased that we have seen in the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a slight flat or upward trend in enrollment, and the same is true in staffing. Okay, here's another one that's a little unusual in its orientation. This is a regular column graph. However, the zero axis is at the top. And if you think about these columns of data, it's as if they're hanging down from zero because all of these values are negative. What this represents is by each grade level, how far the projected enrollment, or in prior years, the actual enrollment, varies from the Hollis educational specifications. The ed specs cover a lot of ground. One of the ones that we look at very closely is class size. It varies by grade level, but if we look at the projected numbers for the coming year, you can see that this long green column hanging down is grade 1, and we're projecting, given the number of expected students and the number of budgeted class sections, that we will have about 3 students less than the Hollis education spec. So we, voters have been very clear that they don't want to go above the ed specs, and we have budgeted appropriately. This is the cost per pupil in Hollis versus New Hampshire average. It is a slightly different calculation. You can't just take our budget each year and divide it by the number of students. The Department of Education up in Concord makes some adjustments, but they apply those adjustments to all school districts. So it is indicative of what we're spending. You can see Hollis is in blue. And this is another important aspect of this is inflation adjusted. So since 2003, I think we've gone up 60% in inflation adjusted spending for the Hollis School District on a per student basis. So again, I think my observation that Hollis voters very much invest in the school district is borne out in this graph. This one I've used in the past. I put it back in the package this year because I think it's interesting, particularly in light of the fact that we've had significant expenditures in the last couple of years with the Hollis, the education program, the lease purchase of a couple years ago, and a bond and another municipal lease being contemplated tonight. You can see that back in 2004, this is a percentile, so in 2004, we're in the 42nd percentile, meaning that our average cost per student was higher than 42% of other districts. We climbed up quite a bit by FY10, and it has come down significantly in the last 10 years or so. We paid off the school bonds back, I think it was in 2015, and even with the addition of the costs of the H-step municipal lease, we bumped up a little bit and are still in the 45th percentile. And again, to ground this, you see up here among 120 comparable districts. I should have led with that. That's a subset. There are, probably close to 200 school districts in New Hampshire, but we don't compare ourselves to some because it's a poor comparison. For example, Manchester and Nashua. At the other end of the spectrum, you have some very small districts up north where the per pupil student is calculated at $30,000, $35,000 a head because of the odd situation they find having to cover a large geographic area with very few students. So, no problem. So this 120 represents an array of districts we feel are comparable to Hollis. Okay, 10% rule and projected taxes. I'm not going to go through this line item by line item. The 10% rule relates to a state law that limits the amount of money that this meeting can vote to appropriate. The 10% refers to 10% more than the Budget Committee has recommended following the public hearing, with some adjustments. You can see those adjustments here: long-term debt, capital outlay for bonds and notes and so forth. Again, one of the things that is kind of odd this year is we have those two contingent articles, and the state counted those as standalone appropriations. What that means is this number, $16,736,000, is substantially higher than we've seen it in the past. Even with these exclusions, we could appropriate almost $1.5 million more than the Budget Committee recommended this evening without running afoul of the law. If this were to become operative tonight, we'll certainly be talking about it each step of the way. Okay. School district tax rate. You're going to see two slides. One is for the school district only, and one is for the town of Hollis. It assumes that all the articles at all three meetings that affect Hollis tax rate, the co-op, the town, and this meeting, the Hollis School District, are passed as written. You can see there's an increase in the operating budget. Much of that is due to trailing costs for collective bargaining agreements for the teachers that were approved in prior years. Warrant articles are slightly up because of the bond and the municipal lease. Aid is down slightly. The net effect is if everything again is passed as written and the tax base increases 0.5% as we assume each year, the tax rate will go up. The portion attributable to Hollis schools will go up from $7.30 to $8.24, an increase of about 13%. We have a state component as well. Blend those together, and we're looking at an increase of just under 11%. So as I said a moment ago, this is essentially the same view. However, we're looking at the components of the overall town tax rate. You can see the town, if all goes as written, we expect to see a slight decrease in the tax rate of just under 3%. We already talked about the increase in Hollis. Co-op has a relatively nominal increase of 3.3%. All in, again, I keep referring back to this upper cell where we say that the assumption is everything is going to pass as written. If everything passes as written and the tax base grows as expected, we'll see an increase of about, 93 cents or 4% on our tax rate. And I believe this is my final slide. We often receive questions about how much of our tax dollar is going to what entity we pay. One thing we haven't talked about is this blue line. The county, we get that from Hillsborough County. We don't get to vote up or down on that. So the good news is that's been relatively consistent at about 5 to 6%. You can see over time, the big shifts here are the yellow line, which is the co-op, has decreased from 39% down to 33%, and the town has increased from 20 to 24%. The biggest drivers there are, over the course of this slide from 2006, the enrollment mix, meaning the percent of Hollis versus percent of Brookline, has narrowed significantly, and that affects apportionment. and results in lower taxes. Also, some bonded debt has been paid off in the co-op, and that has reduced the tax burden. On the town side, we've invested in a couple of properties back in 2016, and there's also an effect here, what I call the balloon effect. This adds up to 100%. So if you decrease it somewhere, you squeeze a balloon, it's going to bulge somewhere else, and the town is going up as an effect. Oh, I was wrong. That wasn't my last slide. Here we have, the Budget Committee has tracked for 25 years, 15 houses that were selected as being representative of Hollis taxes, or the Hollis housing stock, rather, and calculated their average taxes. This is adjusted for inflation in the blue line. So what you see here nominally in present dollar taxes, among those 15 houses, the average tax bill went from $8,600 to about $9,900. On an inflation-adjusted basis, the taxes have actually gone down about $350 from $8,600 to $8,250. And that was my last one. Thank you.
Article 1. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,404,308 to construct, furnish, and equip renovations to the barn and house at 4 Lund Lane in Hollis, and to authorize the issuance of $1,404,308 of bonds or notes in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Finance Act, RSA Chapter 33, and to authorize the school board to issue and negotiate such bonds or notes, and to raise and appropriate an additional sum of $26,477 from taxation for debt service payments payable on such bonds or notes during the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year. A 2/3 ballot vote is required. The school board recommends 4-0-0. The budget committee recommends 4-3-3. Ms. Fareed.
I would like to move that we postpone Articles 1 and 2 until after Articles 4 in order to take up the school-related article first.
The motion is to postpone Articles 1 and 2 until after Article 4 in order to take up the school-related items on Articles 3 and 4. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Roy. This is a debatable motion. Does anyone wish to speak to it?
I just want to point out that we are required by state mandate to post a bond-related article first on the warrant, but the legislative body has the right to change the order, and all of us on the school board, as a sense of the board, agree that we care much more about funding our students' needs at the schools than anything to do with our property at 4 Lund Lane, and we would like to move this ordering in order to ensure that the public has information about the schools first and foremost.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone? A motion to postpone to a specific date or time is only requires a simple majority. If we are ready to vote, all in favor of postponing Articles 1 and 2 until after Article 4, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? And the ayes have it. We will proceed to Article 3. Article 3, to see if the school district will vote to authorize the school board to enter into a 10-year lease purchase agreement for $3,108,900 to finance the acquisition of energy conservation equipment, and related improvements at Hollis Upper Elementary School and Hollis Primary School as recommended by the Hollis School District Facilities Committee, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $365,762 for payments due under the lease purchase agreement during the 2020 to 2021 fiscal year. This lease purchase agreement will contain an escape non-appropriation clause. Simple majority is required. The school board recommends 4-0-0. The budget committee recommends 7-0-0. 7-0-0. The net impact is 21 cents a thousand. Moved by Tammy Fareed, seconded by Carol Roy. Mr. Mann.
I'll take this from it. I need advance.
That's advanced. That's back up.
Okay. So I'd like to cover some history about the school buildings, just to give you some context. The Hollis Primary School was built in 1952. Later, as enrollments grew, wings were added in 1967 and 1978. Much later, the entire school went under a substantial energy upgrade in 2017 and 18, as many of you may be aware. The upper elementary school was built in 1972. Similarly, wings were later added in 1997. Later in 2010, the school went through a major mold remediation, requiring a large commercial dehumidification system. We know that as the Munters unit, if you will. And in 2017-2018, Hughes went through necessary end-of-life and energy upgrades similar to HPS. The conditions of the buildings and structures are excellent. The proposal comprises items identified by our 5-year rolling capital improvement plan, consisting of a number of known infrastructure elements requiring upgrade, or replacement, as well as items previously not addressed or not included in our most recent energy project known as H-STEP. Interest rates are at historic lows. There's an opportunity to combine this work now, funding it under a 10-year municipal lease program rather than incrementally funding significant items year by year. This translates to cost savings for the taxpayer and avoids potential costly school interruptions during the year that should these infrastructure items fail. Breaking out the energy items and the capital items, we see that the energy items make up roughly about 11%, or thereabouts, or $340,000 of the project costs, and consists of items, again, not addressed or not included in our energy project in 2017-2018, and includes things like lighting and the balance of our air source heat pumps that are needed. Conversely, the capital items makes up roughly about 89%, or $2.76 million of the project costs, for numerous critical and significant items identified by our capital improvement plan. Items were prioritized as being critical, significant, or important, and valued, but valued category isn't shown here. As you can see, items stem from air handlers to heat pumps, fire sprinkler systems to unit ventilators, catch basins to kitchen grease traps, heat control systems, and finally, the all but forgotten gym and locker room ventilation systems. This table provides added detail for cost items by school. We have a sprinkler system at HPS that comes in at $693,000. Lighting at Hughes and HPS is priced at $450,000. Air Handler 3 at Hughes for $233,000. and boiler consolidation and conversion for $117,000, to name a few. This detail breaks out the cost by category and by school. Improvements at Hughes comes to about $991,286, while improvements at HPS comes in at $1,836,794. Combining the two and adding 10% contingency as recommended, we arrive at the total project cost of $3,108,900. I'd like to point out that not doing this project doesn't mean items and costs go away. They are simply returned to the capital improvement plan to be addressed year by year within each budget cycle. And this is what a capital improvement plan looks like. As you can see, items are planned out to 5 years. When we complete a current year, we tack on a new year to the right and fill in what items we see coming. These items are typically funded through our budget building process and our maintenance trust entity in any given year. So what if Article 3 fails? There is a contingent article, Article 4, that will ask to raise and appropriate $577,000 to address the must-do items next year. We have a $312,000 need for Air Handler 3 at Hughes, and $245,000 for 13 air source heat pumps at HPS. These funds are raised in a single year rather than capitalized over 10. The result is a bigger impact to taxpayers to the sum of roughly $148 per average household, rather than our proposal of $96 per average household. Thank you.
Is there discussion on Article 3?
Here's my card.
Yes, ma'am. You can,
Chris Opelka, Moore Hill Road.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Chris Opelka.
Thank you.
This article is worded the same as an article that passed $2.8 million in March 2017. The only difference is this one asks for an additional 3.1, a little bit more than that. If this article passes as is, this project will total just under $6 million. At the March 2017 meeting, I was not aware then that more money was going to be asked for now. I have a few questions. Article 1 is a bond for $1 million for 20 years. Article 3 is twice the amount, not bonded, and for 10 years. What was the thinking behind the lease purchase versus a bond? 2, what will be the 10?
Can we handle one question?
Sure.
Okay.
Don't sit. I can't keep all your questions in my head.
I'm sure you won't.
I have the answers. I just need to be sure I don't miss something. So your first question had to do with why did we decide to bond Article 1, which has to do with the property at 4 Lund Lane, and why did we decide to use a municipal lease purchase, for the schools project? As you correctly noted, we used a municipal lease purchase, which is a kind of loan, but it has a different configuration than bonds, to fund HSTEP, the energy project that we implemented in 2017-18. We had intended to pursue a bond. The the Budget Committee, and in particular, Chairman Mark Ledoux, who was the Selectmen's chair as was the representative from the selectmen to the budget committee, had very great experiences with the lease purchase system for town purchases, and urged us frequently, and you can see that on the archive video of meetings, to look at municipal lease purchases. The town has had such good experience, and our administrators found they were able to utilize that method, and it was cheaper at the time. The rates were lower. What I understand your concern about the voting difference, but the thing that drove the decision making was that it has municipal lease purchases have an escape clause. So if we as a paying district had good reason to want to vote to leave that loan, leave the municipal lease purchase, get out of it, and whatever arrangements have to be made to curtail it, stop it, we'd have that right. That's what we mean when we say that it has an escape clause. We spent the early part of this week and the late part of last week asking Attorney O'Shaughnessy and bond counsel also separately to explain further why the voting difference. And the escape clause is the reason that the municipal lease purchase vote can be a simple majority while the bond requires 2/3, and that's not anything at the district level. That's a state level legislation that we have no control over. Is that the answer to your question? So by the way, let me finish. I'm sorry. When the budget committee asked us the same question as you've just asked, we pointed out that they led us to a lease purchase on the H step, and we in fact had a very good experience with both the process and the way that things were funded. And because this current recommendation, this current Article 3, is mostly durable goods, which is a natural vehicle for a lease purchase. The town uses this mechanism for purchasing, like the $250,000 ladder truck and all kinds of the big yellow machines they buy and stuff, or they lease purchase. That's the direction that we went in.
Okay, but things have changed in terms of lease purchase and bonds. The bond rate now is a little bit lower.
That wasn't
what I would like to see or hear is what will be the 10 yearly payments for the 10-year lease purchase proposal. In dollars, what is the cost of having the lease purchase for 10 years? Bond rates, as I said, are presently low. In dollars, what is the cost of a 10-year bond? I think if you go to the municipal bond website, I think it's quoting a 10-year at 1.47.
I wanted to point out something to you that we learned from the research that our business administrator has been working on through both bond banks, lease purchase providers, et cetera. They give us percentages based on a price they set last spring, but we see a track record of what they're loaning, what rates they're loaning to other borrowers, and it can significantly less. And just what we're seeing, which is not at all exhaustive research, but what we can see is that, as far as I know, until at least last week, the rates that we were being told for the lease purchase were lower by a little bit, but every penny counts. So that's another reason that we went.
So do you have figures of the bond versus the lease purchase, what the cost is?
Would you mind if I let Tom Gehan answer, since he's chair of the budget committee? Thank you.
Sure.
Tom, do you want to answer that? Oh, Andy's going to. Excuse me.
I don't have the exact cost number for you, but I did want to explain that when we went out to the bond company, we were provided somewhere between 3.75 and 3. When we did the lease, the 10-year was 3.07. The other reason that is a big differential, the project will most likely not be completed in 1 year. So while that money sits, so let's say the first summer we do half or 1/3 of the project and spend $1 million. That means $2 million sits in an account that we gain interest off of. That's not the case on a bond. And it's very doubtful that all the projects will be done in 1 year. So by spreading it out over those multiple years, we actually gain interest until we spend that money.
Except the interest rate is so low.
The paying interest rate is not great, but 1 is better than 0.
it still would be nice to have a dollar figure of the cost of a bond versus a lease for 10 years.
I agree with you. You know, the issue that I raised right before Mr. Corey came up is that until we actually pass a warrant article, we can't get a quote. We can only get estimates, and that's what I was saying before. The estimates that all the lenders are giving us are based on things they posted last spring, but we know from the financial news that, you know, those rates are plummeting. So the numbers that Mr. Corey gave you are based on the estimates, but they can't quote us a number until we pass, you know, the legislation.
Okay, I think in the article, it talks about what next year's payment would be.
Based
but
on that
that's
estimate.
usually like 6 months. So we know that's the beginning and the end. What's the middle going to be? Because I don't see that. I haven't heard that. That's one thing.
It's a good point. So the first payment of all these kinds of notes and such is an interest-only payment. That's why they're always so low, right?
That's why they're
No?
so
I'm sorry.
low.
I am being corrected. I beg your pardon. The first year.
Uh-huh.
No, your point is perfectly valid. I beg your pardon, Andy. Please explain.
In a bond situation, you pay just a percentage of the interest in the first year. In a lease, you pay the consistent amount over the 10 years.
So is what's quoted in that article going to be for 10 years, or is it going to be increased? Is that only 6 months?
It's the 26,000. 26,000, Tom, can you explain to her?
365,000.
365,000, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what's.
Do you want to take it? Yeah, that's the.
In the article, we have 365,762.
Right.
That is the estimate for each year of the 10 years.
Okay,
For
so
the
it's
lease.
not a 6 months, the
No.
beginning and end, like, okay.
No. Thank you. That's a great question.
Am I correct that almost 600,000 of the 3 million plus in Article 3 is for work that was not completed or cost overruns? How much are cost overruns, and how much is work that was not completed?
Yep.
Is-
I can speak to that in detail. Approximately 10-11% of the original $2.8 million H-STEP energy project was not, we were not able to complete it. One of the major categories was the inside lighting, indoor lighting, and the other was half of the air source heat pumps we had planned and intended to install at the primary school. The lights were for both schools. We ran into engineering, tariff, labor escalations. Our original engineering plans for the wrapping of the primary school had to be modified once our architect came on board and examined the building more closely. That entailed some cost increases in engineering costs and materials. We had a trade war that got started. Most of the materials were aluminum. There was a 25% tariff on aluminum. We had significant escalation in labor costs. You'll remember right about then is when bus drivers got hard to find, et cetera. So we saw a lot of increased costs. We had projected in 2017, but, you know, the 2.8 million. And within a year and a half, we were seeing significant cost changes. We had a hard decision to make once summer of 2018 arrived and the wrapping of Hughes, which was an insulation project, showed up on our doorstep and had these adjustments made to it. We realized we'd have to change our plans. Lighting in both buildings is quite sufficient. We prefer LED lighting because it is much cheaper to run. It's much, the color is better for kids in a learning environment. The bulbs need changing far less often, et cetera. And we had been advised that they would pay for themselves in about 2 years. So we felt that with the lighting being intact in the buildings as is, that changed priority to lower because, again, the costs of the wrapping of the building at the primary school were critically important. In addition, the heat pumps that we did install replaced the hydronic system, that is the hot water radiator system, in the original 1952 brick section. The 13 we did not install were in the newer section of the primary school, built much later, that the classrooms were heated partly by an oil boiler and partly by something called unit ventilation. Unit ventilation units are heaters in each of the classrooms. They're central heat, forced air, etc., but they're built into the walls. Those 13 classrooms that used the unit ventilation system, they needed replacing. They're very old. They're original equipment. However, they were still functioning. We had the boiler, and still do, furnace as a backup, so we knew the kids would be safe and warm, and we were faced with a conundrum, and the analysis was very intensive and difficult, and that's how we landed. So approximately 10% of the costs of the original project, a little more, I guess 11 or 12%, 340,000 out of the 2.8 million, ended up being deferred and not completed. Those two items are in this project now for two reasons. The lights are still a huge value, and both as a learning environment benefit as well as a cost efficiency. They cost so much less to run. The the unit ventilators in those 13 classrooms have seen their last. Our maintenance folks have to have parts manufactured. They're so old we can't get them used even on eBay anymore, and they can't sustain another winter. Keep in mind, this is 3 years after the original study was done. So
I understand the cost overruns. What I don't understand is, do we pay for work not completed?
Absolutely not. And we visited this with the budget committee and at the school board in our public hearings and in public forums. So that material is all listed in links on the voter guide I think everyone received. So if you wanted to dig into that material in more detail, it's available to you. We never paid for work or materials that did not get used. The decision to not...
But were they planned on?
They were included in March 2017 when we presented that warrant. They were on the list of intended projects, but the wrapping... So if you'll remember, maybe you remember the photograph of the outside of HPS that was taken with infrared cameras. Mm-hmm. It showed that the brick walls had a insulation factor of R2. There was brick and there was interior paint and a little plaster, and that was it. Even if we had replaced every heating utensil in the entire building, we were heating Hollis. It was radiating out of the building. So it was critically important to wrap that building in insulation. The providers, the contractors estimate that we got it up to about R40, R35, R40.
Okay.
And that's how we prioritized.
All right.
And Ms. Opelka, we determined that in the late spring, and that's why we were able to avoid purchasing lights or purchasing air source heat pumps that didn't get installed.
I just have two more questions. Will this...
Yes? There is, but she's asking questions. So this is actually very relevant. So please continue.
Will this lease purchase complete all energy conservation equipment and related improvements at Hughes and HPS? For how long? I just saw this one chart that was referred to, that you've got this capital improvement plan that keeps growing. So I'm just curious, because we've had 2 articles now in a very short period of time for what I would call a large chunk of money. You know, and many of us on the board and some of us in the audience have had kids go through the school, which I think we all thought when our kids were going through should be thrown out. I believe there was a moratorium on building aid through June 2017, and the aid was for FY18 projects, one-time decision was made for it. I don't know if there's any legislators here who could update us on the thinking of building aid. And I ask this because I noticed that as of January 13th this year, that Hollis submitted an application for building aid for the primary school on Hughes for 22-23 fiscal year for, I believe, this project, and that's based on the figures that are stated there. If this passes now, is it correct that we would not be eligible for building aid fund through that application if it were made available?
Ms. Opelka, I don't know. I'll ask Andy Corey if the moderator allows him to answer. I want to answer the first part of your question and then ask Mr. Corey to complete the answer. When we started the energy project in 2015, one of the very topmost questions, and we have been visiting it until this year, is should we build a new schools instead? The architects have informed us, the engineers, et cetera, that the industry round figure, the estimate per square foot for a new public school building is approximately $300 to $325 a square foot just for the building, not the plumbing, not the wells, not the electrics, not the furnishings, not the kitchen equipment, okay? And that would amount to 17 million plus for the primary school alone, based on square footage, which is based on state regulations having to do with how much square footage is required per student. The upper elementary would cost another about 20 million. So we're talking a minimum of $35 million. In this case, what we're doing is replacing old worn equipment and increasing the cost efficiency and the performance for only 6 in the total.
We did put in a placeholder. The likelihood of a community like Hollis receiving building aid, I would say, is slim at best at this time. But we felt it would be prudent to put that placeholder in. If we should arrive and they reopen building aid, we will have the opportunity to resubmit our proposal. I'm not sure if it would be funded, just like I'm not sure if they would fund the energy project.
I think you've asked a number of good questions, but I think it's time for someone else to speak. Mr. Buteau.
Brandon Buteau, Buttonwood Drive. Move the question.
Do you have a card? Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Harris. The motion was to move the question. This is a motion to end debate. Requires a 2/3 vote to do so. Since Mr. Garuba is already in line, he may speak even if the motion passes. All in favor of ending debate, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Garuba.
Joe Garuba, 28 Winchester Drive. I have a couple of questions. The escape clause for this lease, in general, my understanding of leases are usually a car or something that's easily returnable. In the case of this particular article, we're talking about items that are installed in a building. So could someone explain what the cost of that escape clause would be if we wanted to enact it, and how you would physically get out of a lease when things have been installed into a structure?
So what you're imagining is a repossession because of some kind of default. This escape clause is not on the basis of a default for payment. It is a change of heart, if you will. We don't want to continue, and we want to separate the lease from the lease. And from there, a negotiation would have to take place with the bank to figure out how to do that. It's not like it's not like a repossession where they're going to say we need it all back. It has to do with at what point there's a proration.
So for infrastructure type items, which we probably couldn't give back, we would end up paying for them in a lump sum payment. Is that the idea?
I think if we use them, I think it would be technical and legal, but it's not the same thing as a repossession where they come in and rip it all out. Those are negotiated.
So if that is the basis for changing the vote from a 50% majority to a 60, two-thirds majority, it doesn't actually seem to change the end result of, we really can't get out of this.
Here's one
because
difference.
of the fact that we can't just stop using the equipment that's been installed. We'll have to pay for it.
So in a bond, let's say a hurricane comes through in 1938 and razes the buildings, we still have to pay it. With a lease purchase, we have different options. There are other options.
Okay.
Council can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that an escape clause is required for a lease purchase agreement, but required by the state.
Mr. Harris of the Budget Committee is pointing out that it would require a vote at a district meeting, whether a special meeting or the annual meeting, to get out of it. It's not something that the school board could decide. The voters would have to decide it.
Thank you. The next point I wanted to go into is this is energy efficiency equipment. So typically when you look at the purchase of energy efficiency equipment, you look at the buyback period for when it's going to pay for itself. Is there any of that that's factored in here? Because I didn't hear any discussion of that.
I'm not sure what you mean buyback period.
Payback.
So like,
payback.
for example,
I
the
heard you
light,
say
the lighting,
buyback.
the lighting is
Right.
going to use less energy, so theoretically
correct.
we should be paying less.
Correct. So the lighting is a unique item. We brought to you the lighting as a line item on the original H-step warrant for approximately, I'm forgetting exactly the number, even though I read it just this afternoon. So under $200,000, and we expected a 2-year payback. By December, we had different quotes, and by this year, we had different quotes, and our energy experts, the consultants we've hired and worked with, feel like they need to parse out exactly what the apples and oranges of all of that is, and that was another factor in deciding not to pursue the lighting, because there was some confusion as to why these quotes were happening in the middle of the trade concerns, because the high efficiency, high performance lights come from China, and there was a lot of trade problems at that point and tariffs and such. So the air source heat pumps have a 10 to 20 year, 15 to 20 year expected lifespan. We visited different schools and different facilities that use them, and they've lived much longer than that. So, you know, we're given, for example, solar panels, they're told they can last 20 years, but we know very well they can last 30 to 50 years, but that's the manufacturer's estimate. So we expect the payback to be well within the payment period of the municipal lease purchase, and we expect the equipment to be durable far beyond that period. For example, Air Handler 3 has got to be probably from 1972.
So based on the results, I think it was 2018 when we started doing the work. Do we have any actual numbers for where we stand as far as cost versus savings?
We feel that we achieved approximately 42% of the savings we expected in the first year, because the lighting was expected to contribute about 15% of the savings, and the air source heat pumps were expected to contribute a significant amount of the savings also. I wanted to point out also that in the original H-step project, an element that took us completely by surprise is we needed a $70,000 roofing change at Hughes to support the solar panels, and it was decided among all of us that it was completely the right thing to do, because the roof was going to need to change in 5 years anyway. So that was an additional cost. I meant to tell Ms. Opelka this, an additional cost chunk that came out of the H-step funding. Keep in mind also the air source heat pumps are run by electricity, and those solar arrays on the roofs, run them. We are able to utilize that extra power from those very successfully. The solar arrays have worked beautifully. All the elements, I have to tell you, all of the elements we installed are working to plan. They're working as advertised. They've created, we had an unexpected benefit from the wrapping of the primary school. The teachers reported that it's so much quieter from road noise in those classrooms that are on the outside of the building. That's significant. It's meaningful.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Mr. Gruba.
Okay, it is now time to vote. We can do this by a card vote, and it requires only a simple majority. All in favor of authorizing a 10-year lease purchase agreement for approximately $3,100,000. Please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? And the ayes have it. Article 4. In the event that Article 3 is not approved, see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $557,000 for the purchase and installation of an air handler for Hollis Upper Elementary School and 19 air source heat pumps at the Hollis Primary School as recommended by the Hollis School District. Moved by Tammy Fareed, seconded by Carol Roy. Inasmuch as Article 3 passed, I would like to request a motion to pass over Article 4. Moved by Mr. Dean, seconded by Ms. Fareed. Is there any discussion about passing over? All in favor of passing over Article 4, please raise your card. Thank you. All opposed? And we will pass over Article 4. I know. There's no simple button here to do that.
Keep going. Last one. There you go.
Mr. Mann.
So before we get into the details of this proposal, late last week we had a rather unexpected situation happen that affects this article, and it's going to be very important that I walk you through what took place, so you're fully aware of the state of Article 1. When you think of a bond like Article 1, they're special. They have specific requirements. A public hearing for the bond must be conducted prior to the annual district meeting. Notifications of a public hearing must be announced in the paper by RSA. Announcements and public hearings for bonds have specific deadlines and timelines that must be met to be legal. The issue with Article 1 is the school board became aware late last week that the newspaper failed to run our public hearing announcement. The results, the situation has created a violation of the requirements for a bond article, rendering Article 1 legally defective. As you can imagine, this situation is very frustrating. This situation places roughly 2 years of study, work, and preparation all at risk, as the bond banks would not be willing to issue a bond with a defective article of any sort. The school board immediately reached out to our bond counsel for guidance, and a special school board meeting was held on Monday night, March 9th, to assess options and next steps in the preparation of tonight's meeting. The school board bond counsel advised there is a legal remedy that exists if Article 1 passes tonight with a 2/3 vote. The school board may hold a special district meeting no earlier than April 1st. Warrant postings, announcements, and public hearings must comply with the required timelines and deadlines. At the special meeting, Article 1 would be re-presented and re-voted on. So your voting options tonight are, we can present Article 1 as intended. You may choose to move to an up and down secret ballot vote as intended. Or you may choose to dispense with Article 1 with a motion to table or postpone indefinitely. Mr. Moderator, shall I proceed, or do you want to open the floor for any questions or clarifications?
I think we can ask questions and go for clarifications. Yes, ma'am.
Joanne Lager, Shed Lane. So is there an option where we don't vote tonight but go through these other requirements and have a special district meeting after April 1st?
No.
No. The only way we can have a special meeting is if this article is passed by this legislature tonight. If it fails, it's done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the options right now, I would like to move towards a sense of the meeting. This is not an official vote on anything, but I would like the legislative body, which is all of you folks, to guide the meeting as to whether you would like to postpone or table this motion, in which case it would not come back until next year's annual meeting, or if you want to proceed to an actual vote on the bond article. If you proceed, then there are two possible results. If it fails, then again, it is done until next annual meeting. If it passes, then we would have to have a special district meeting whose purpose is to affirm the result of tonight's meeting, and it would again have to pass by a 2/3 majority. Are there questions or observations about where we're going here? Mr. Buteau.
Brandon Buteau, Buttonwood Drive. So would we go through the whole presentation tonight and then vote and then come back and have to go through the whole presentation again, because it will be a different meeting with possibly different people showing up, and vote again? Is that in order for this to pass? Is that essentially what we're saying?
The special meeting would be a little different because you're not voting on the bond itself. You are voting to essentially affirm the result of the meeting. So you don't have to go through the entire presentation and so on, but that would be up to what the school board would want to present at that time.
Okay. Do we have a sense of, in fact, is that what the school board would plan to do?
So the question is, if we voted tonight, and if it passed, and if we went to a special meeting, what would you be presenting at the special meeting?
Well, we would have the materials ready to go. We might choose to summarize that down. My concern is, to your point, we would have a different mix of people who are entitled to hear the presentation. So my feeling is, my sense is that we would most likely run the presentation. It's about 10 minutes. It's like 7 slides. And then open it up for a conversation and questions and so forth.
Okay. So is there a motion on the floor for which way to proceed, or what's?
But there will be. Okay. Right now we are discussing our options. Mr. Hyde.
Thank you. Chris Hyde, 16 Arbor Lane. There's one other aspect of this that is troubling, that this building that we're going to do the renovation is, obviously, because you're here, is owned by the Hollis School District. It's being utilized by the SAU. The SAU is funded by the sending districts of both Brookline and its various entities and Hollis and its various entities. Right now, if we go through a bond for this, we are the obligated party as Hollis taxpayers with no obligation and no long-term lease agreement attached in any way, shape, or form to this article.
We are, yes.
Yeah, and this is in.
We're talking
This is in portion to try to say why going one way or another you might want to think about this. It's not to the background.
Discussion of the underlying article.
The underlying article. And so when you're thinking about this, know that one of the things that I think most of we voted 5-3 in the Budget Committee in support of this. The 3 who were opposed had big concerns about the lack of a obligation to stay in the building by the sending districts because they could decide 2 years from now to get up and go, and we have the bond obligation on us. And I think some of the other members that even voted in favor of this were also concerned and hope to get that addressed at this meeting at this time. So I have some amendments that I'm not going to offer until we decide which path we're going to go down on, but I wanted to raise this as an issue. We may have an ability to go ahead and make an amendment to try to change things, but there are some defects in this that are still problematic. Frankly, I probably favor at the moment to table this despite the hard work and efforts that have been going on, and ultimately favor doing this in a logical fashion, but I think we need one more year to get through that. So that's my view.
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Norrie, Hardy Lane. Is the building going to fall down in the next 12 months? Okay. That's just wanted to make sure it's going to be safe for 12 months if it gets tabled. All right, cool.
To be clear, the answer to that question was no.
All right.
Ms. Opak.
Chris Opelka, Moore Hill Road. I would agree with Chris. If this wasn't publicized properly, people who do read the paper didn't see it. And I don't think that that's fair to those people who depend on the paper. So you're excluding them.
This is the reason for the defect, and to be clear, this was not the fault of the school board whatsoever.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I agree with Chris that I think that we could table. I'm more for tabling it till next year.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Maureen Masterson, Milton Place. I have a question. What does the school board recommend? Table it or vote?
We had a very vigorous discussion on Monday night, as you could imagine.
And you can watch the video.
Yeah, it's up there. You can just watch the whole thing. We have some concerns about having to do a special meeting and asking people to come out the next, when maybe in 3 or 4 weeks from now. I think the takeaway of that meeting was we really didn't want 5 of us deciding. We wanted to bring the situation to you and the options to you to help to advise us what to do. If it passes, we will have that special meeting and we'll follow through. But we really want a sense. Are we behind this project to move forward? Do we want to maybe come back next year? I think the takeaway of this board, we want to hear from you.
I have another question. How much time, energy, money, if you can quantify it, have you spent on developing this proposal?
Well, it's all in my presentation, but I'll give you a peek.
Okay. Yeah.
Last year, Article 3 provided $64,600 to do a study. We had a lot of expertise. We had the main person that was helping us on the energy project stayed on, and we worked through most of the year on this. We had a whole committee working on it for a year. Prior to that, we were preparing for the Article 3 that passed last year for a year. So we've got several years wrapped up in asking ourselves, first of all, that property doesn't owe us anything. We've been there for 20 years. We've basically just painted, maybe changed a furnace once in a while when it needed, maybe air conditioner or a window. Really it doesn't owe us anything. But there are a lot of reasons we would love to present to you tonight that justify why we need to do something with this asset. And I just would want to point out, we had big, long, substantive discussions with the school board. We understand their concerns. We depend on them to look and advise us from a dollar perspective. However, a school board has to look at these things differently. We have to look at what those changes will do to improve our operations and the non-monetary value that we get from making these changes to that property. We look at that property like an asset, like we look at a school or any other hard asset that we have. It's been 20 years. We have overcrowding issues. We need to address it.
Thank you.
Betsy Cox, 11 Buttonwood. I had the pleasure of working in that building 10 years ago. And I've been waiting 10 years for something to come forward to fix that place. It wasn't just replacing the furnace. The furnace died and they worked there for 6 weeks while it was cold in the building. When I worked there was no insulation. You froze in the winter. You overheated in the summer. There was no space for meetings. There was no privacy between offices. You could hear everybody across the building having private conversations. It was a tough place to work. And so I've been waiting. I wanted to think of some way to state what my thoughts were on this building and what needs to be done with it. And it came to me that if you've seen that commercial where we buy ugly houses, that says it all about the SAU. It needs work, and we need to vote to decide tonight. This question is simply whether or not we will vote to allow the bond to be voted on again.
Ms. Cox, up here,
the bond
please.
will die. So this vote is simply, I'm clarifying, and you correct me if I'm wrong. What we're talking about now is deciding whether or not we're going to vote to have a bond or not have a bond.
Correct.
That's the vote that's going to happen
No.
if we decide to go forward.
It will be a sense of the meeting.
And then if we have the vote, it still has to be voted on again so people will have an opportunity
Yes.
to think. It's like that 36 hours after buying a car, you get to rethink about it. But I'm just going to say that it needs to be done. It needed to be done 10 years ago. So thank you, Andy, for putting up with all of the issues in that building. I commiserate.
Hi. My goal is to try not to say anything in the meeting, and I failed my goal. Just to be really clear, the vote on Article 1 would be whether to authorize the bond, right? If it passes by 2/3, the board now has authorization. However, there's a flaw because there is a procedural defect in the notice. The purpose of the special meeting is to correct the procedural defect. It used to be a long time ago that when these procedural defects happened, the district would ask a legislator to file a special bill to ratify and correct the procedural defect. The legislature was wise and they adopted the law, which allows us to have a special meeting. It's called the legalization of a meeting. The sole purpose would be to ratify the vote by correcting the technical procedural defect. And that's what the warrant article would say. The vote is still a 2/3 vote, and I suspect, as the chair said, that the conversation would be about the bond because the people present would want to know what the substance is of what the vote is. But technically, all you're doing is voting to legalize this vote. All right? Is that clear?
Mr. Guillen.
Tom Guillen. Pardon me, Tom Guillen, Broad Street. First, I want to commend the school board and everyone who's worked so diligently on this project and underscore the fact that the defect here is generated by the Nashua Telegraph, not by the actions or inactions of anybody in the room tonight. Having said that, given the confusion and the size of the expenditure, I would like to motion to table this.
Sorry, say what are you moving?
Motion to table.
Okay,
Article 1.
That's what you want to do.
Yes.
I hear you. Okay, Mr. Garuba, we're still talking about sense of the meeting, so we're not
So my motion's out of order?
It's pending. We're not going to address it just yet.
Okay.
But soon, Mr. Garuba.
Joe Garuba, 28 Winchester Drive. We're really debating the actual warrant article at this point, so
Yes.
I want to move the question.
That's all right. So what, Mr. Buteau?
I just want to clarify, we're going to have a vote on which way we're going to go with the procedure.
Yes.
And that vote is going to be what, a majority vote? And then one of those subsequent votes is going to be a 2/3 vote to pass, correct?
Certainly the subsequent vote will be a 2/3 vote, but
Okay.
yes, the sense would be a simple majority. Okay. If what you want is for it to be defeated, then you want to vote for dealing with the question and against the question.
Understand.
No. So we have come to take a sense of the meeting as to whether you would like to table this article or proceed to debate and vote on this article.
Brooke Arthur,
Yeah.
Ridge Road. It doesn't sound like we've said it. Is there an option to hear the presentation and then table the article? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
But let me back up. No, we can't, because there already is a pending motion to table.
Okay.
So no. The article has been moved when we opened the meeting. Yeah. A sense of the meeting. Do you wish to table or do you wish to vote on the article? If you wish to table, please raise your cards. Thank you. If you would like to actually vote on the motion, please raise your cards. That's very close. Can the counters count this one? Are you ready to count? We are taking a sense of the meeting about how to proceed. Are you ready? All right. If you wish to table, please raise your cards. This is only a sense of the meeting. Okay, thank you. If you wish to proceed to a vote, please raise your cards. Thank you. You can raise your point of order, which is? Yeah. Yes. Yep. Okay, the vote was to table 35 and to vote was 22. So now we are coming to the actual motion, and there is a motion on the floor to table. It requires a 2/3 vote because it is a motion that cuts off debate. If If this motion fails, we could vote again to table after the presentation. All in favor of tabling the article, please raise your cards. Count, please. Who moved to table? Did somebody second? Okay. The motion on the floor is to table. I have asked for those in favor. Thank you. You can put your cards down. All opposed to tabling, please raise your cards. Thank you. You can put your cards down. I apologize for this convoluted procedure, but the school board explicitly wanted the guidance of the legislative body here, and I'm trying to accommodate their wishes. No?
I'm going to sit here till you say I can talk. What's going on? I've lost track. I've lost track.
Waiting for the count.
Oh, they're still counting? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. 23 noes. 23 noes. The vote was 34 in favor of tabling and 23 opposed. The motion fails. Ms. Farid.
So the motion to table fails
The motion to table fails.
because it required a 2/3 majority.
Requires a 2/3 majority, and the next thing that should happen is a presentation.
Excellent.
Mr. Mann.
Okay, what used to be Article 1, Forlun Lane. Yes. Got it. Is that better? Okay. All right, as was stated, the Hollis School District owns and operates and maintains the Forlun Lane property consisting of the barn and the farmhouse. The district rents this space to the SAU 41 administration for their offices for the last 20 years. Over the 20 years, administrative demands and statutory requirements have changed. Over this time, new needs and new roles have been added, such as computer administration, support our computer infrastructure and the ability to bring your own device, IT network administration, keeping the networks operating and maintained, expanded demands and resources for student services and the business office. All these resulting in offices growing steadily overcrowded. The Hollis District has conducted several studies of Forlun Lane in 2010, 2015, and most recently 2019. Those studies have provided consistent findings of long-standing issues. Break rooms and bathrooms are out of date. Offices are overcrowded. Virtually no meeting space. Document storage is becoming unmanageable. Constant shifting and bifurcating offices over time has resulted in an archaic floor plan where there corridors running through offices to get to another office. Consistent facility studies have shown, studies show that alternate commercial locations are very limited. What is available is not suited, will not suit the needs of the SAU office. Acquiring a new location would be expensive, complex, and out of scope for the Hollis School District responsibilities. Comparative rent is substantially higher. It's at $14 a square foot or more. We are currently charging the districts $4.27. And I would argue, if you're worried about a long-term lease, $4.27, where everywhere else is $14 and higher, is your long-term lease. New location rent is subject to long-term increases by a third-party landlord. Fit-up costs, those costs that are to configure new spaces, run about $120 a square foot. Those costs alone is comparable to the renovation costs of our proposal. In March 2019, that is, Article 3 was passed, providing $64,600 to examine options for improving 4 Lund Lane, among other school building items related to energy. In essence, Article 3 called for developing and delivering a scoped, scaled, and costed plan for improving the property for your consideration tonight. A facilities committee was assembled to advise the board on 5 options covering office and barn renovations to office and barn demolition and replacement, and various combinations in between that are shown here. Given overall costs of these options, picking the one that would address the major issues identified by the facility study and providing the biggest value, the board chose the minor office and full barn renovations option for $1.4 million as the most viable, or MVP, to bring before the community tonight. Jump here? I guess not. Okay, no, we're good. The proposal converts the barn to much needed usable meeting, office, and storage space. The first floor shown here provides for meeting space, bathrooms, facilities, and some of the offices. The second floor provides the bulk of the new office space, a collaboration area, and modest bathroom facilities. While the basement floor provides a secure and spacious document storage area, the likes of which we could only have imagined before we started this project, or at least the plan. The barn renovations help to alleviate the office crowding in the farmhouse. It provides a modest farmhouse floor plan reconfiguration and allows for upgrades of bathrooms and break room facilities that the first floor and the second floor shows. So, what do we get after this renovation is over? The completed renovation takes us from roughly 3,800 square feet, 10 offices, small conference room, and inadequate attic storage, to roughly 8,300 square feet, 17 offices in total, a collaboration area, a IT server equipment room, a large conference area, and a large secure file storage area. So if Article 1 fails to pass, there is a contingent Article 2, that will ask to raise and appropriate $250,000 to stabilize and slow further deterioration of the barn. These funds are raised in 1 year rather than capitalized over 20. Contingent stabilization funds, if approved, do not add any operational value for us. There is no usable office space, no extra meeting space or storage space provided by these funds. Thank you.
Discussion on Article 1.
Catherine Ferguson, Orchard Drive. If this passes and that project's completed, it was called minor changes to the farmhouse. Is there anything else that's going to be asked to fix the farmhouse in a few years to come, since this was the, kind of not the full option in
I mean,
the
that
list?
was one of the reasons why we conducted the study, right? We wanted to see and we did the same things with the schools a couple of years ago. We wanted to really understand the structures, really understand changing this or changing that, what would it do? So we spent that time looking 2019, looking at that. I mean, to the extent that we have a crystal ball and can, sometimes you don't know what the unknowns are, and any project is like that. But we believe the project that we scoped out here is fairly comprehensive, and we're really just using the space that we already have in the barn.
Mm-hmm.
The barn is completely unusable right now. And we want to utilize that. And we believe, after doing the study, that conversion of the barn is going to alleviate a lot of pressure on the farmhouse from a standpoint of space and other things. I mean, the farmhouse has been there for 150 years, for crying out loud, so it's not going anywhere.
And the farmhouse changes as well, you feel are adequate to sustain this change as a project that isn't going to have something come up with the farmhouse in the next couple of years that needs to then be fixed or upgraded again?
Well, I mean, there's
as much as you can plan.
There could be capital improvement things like a new roof, and things that just run down over time. I know we replaced the furnace about maybe 6 years ago. That's working fine now. We tightened up the fieldstone foundation, and it used to be drafty and leaked. So there was a year where we took care of that. But all those things really were addressed through our maintenance trust fund of the property, which really is just what it's there for, to maintain it. It's not to do projects like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Bill Opelka, Moore Hill Road. I am a little distraught that you, the school board, are only charging $4 a square foot. If we approve this bond, I would hope that we would be charging a lot more. We need to be able to recoup some of this money. I mean, this is not a charity. We're not a charity for the SAU. We need to recoup the money. The other thing is, I really, really think we need to have a lease. You downplayed that. I really do believe we need a lease. We need something that says the SAU is here. And if they are not going to be here, then they need to pay us. There needs to be some compensation for that. And finally, the one thing I didn't see in your plan is that this building doesn't seem to be ADA compliant. You do not have an elevator in here, so people cannot get to the second floor. Is that going to be a problem?
So that came up with our experts on the project. Depending on the magnitude of the changes of the existing building that you're making, speaking specifically of the farmhouse, there's no elevator indicated within this plan. I believe for the barn, and Andy, keep me straight here, that there are ramps and so forth for egress and ingress of the barn that meets the ADA requirements on the barn side. So we have taken a close look at that, because those would be extensive costs to if we had to put in an elevator.
Yes, and
it's not indicated for this.
Well, you have a second floor there where you will have employees who, if they are handicapped, you will need to provide some way of them getting up to that second floor.
Number one, thank you for thinking of it. And number two, our architect has studied this issue very closely. It was discussed extensively during the facilities meetings. Because of the square footage and because of the scope of change, we are not obligated by law to provide an elevator for this project, either in the barn or in the farmhouse. The ADA compliance issues, which are very, very important to all of us, are met on the first floor. There will be handicap parking and handicapped access to that first floor of the barn. And the bathroom is explicitly designed to be fully ADA accessible, as are all of the spaces in that downstairs area, and they meet all of the ADA obligations and requirements. And these are critically important to us as a school district.
So you will not be coming back to us in a few years saying we need to get an elevator because we have somebody here.
Right. We've asked this repeatedly. It has not as much to do with employees as much as also visitors. We are a school district. We host all kinds of people day in and day out. We have to absolutely be sure we are 100% inclusive in every possible fashion. And the architect that we work with, Dave Ely, is very sensitive to this. He's built many schools, and he researched the most current code, and we're good.
Okay. And the only other thing is, I really do want to hear what the school district is planning to do in terms of a cost to increase the rent for the SAU.
So
and saying that $4 a square foot, is it going to keep the SAU here?
Well,
that's not it. That's not. It's not a contract.
Well, that's true. It's not a contract. I'm not trying to portray that it is in any shape or form. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the original square footage rate that we charged was something like $2.50 a square foot. What that was doing is, and we had the articles every year, it raised $8,000 to maintain the property for as long as I can remember. Over time, and having conversations with the budget committee, we decided that times have changed. We need more money to properly maintain it. The board took a 3-year step and changed it over 3 years to get it to $4.27. What that produces is just short of $25,000 a year to maintain the property. For over that time, those funds have been sufficient to do that. As a matter of fact, I don't know if we're running a slight surplus in that maintenance account or not, maybe a slight one. So what we're putting in is what we're using to maintain the property, and it's at the right place right now, given the condition of the workspace.
But that's not taking into account the cost of this bond.
No, but
and I would hope that the school board
Of course not. I mean, because we don't have a project yet. So we're not going to raise. For example, we're not going to raise the rent to $16 a square foot in the current space that's there. Mm-hmm. We would be able to command a higher square foot, making these type of improvements. And I've ran some scenarios. If you can justify a $7 or $8 a square foot, we come close to covering almost 70% of the bond costs.
70% is not enough. Thank you.
So there's another piece.
Stop.
No, there's another piece.
Stop.
Because it's not a split. It's not a split.
Yeah, there's another consequence to the below market rate. As I understand it, the SAU is funded by all the districts. And for Hollis, the the cost per square foot is basically a wash, because from the Hollis district, it's either one goes in one pocket or the other. That's not true for Brookline.
That's right.
So in effect, if we have a below market rate for the SAU, we are further benefiting Brookline. So not only at the high school do we have the Hollis taxpayers paying more per student than Brookline, now we've got a further subsidy through the SAU with a below market rate. So I would ask certainly the Budget Committee to think that through on the rate for the lease. Thank you.
So your point is well taken, because what I was going to say is that the split between the towns are apportioned. Hollis will always pay close to 60% of the bill, no matter how you slice the square foot costs, and Brookline is about 42%.
Right, and I think that all of it should be at a market rate. For the Hollis taxpayer, we're just trading dollars, but there's no reason to further subsidize Brookline. Thank you.
Ms. Opeka.
Chris Opelka, Moore Road. One thing I noted in your pictures are that your windows on the barn are different than the windows right now. Has the Historic Commission been approving this item? And I would also like to say, I know Tammy had a lot to say about the elevator and being ADA compliant. I would like you to think a little bit out of the box, that you have people there who are now walking and talking and being able to go to the bathroom if the bathrooms are only on the first floor. I don't know what the situation on the second floor is in the building. I can't remember. But your workers also that you have right now may become somewhat incapacitated. And you might not be able to shuffle around all of the people to where you've got office space so that they can be there. Additionally, even if you came back and wanted an elevator, you have now 2 floors, one on the barn and one in the main building. And there is a connector in the middle, yes, but I don't believe it's 2 floors, so I don't know how you can go from one floor of the second floor of the barn to the second floor of the without an elevator. So those are 2 things that are concerning to me. In addition to, I'd like to really hear from the Budget Committee more about the lease and the subsidy of Hollis, that we're really paying a lot more for it rather than we're just not going to be recouping this money.
That's not a point of order, that's a question, and you can stand in line and ask your question. Ms. Roy.
I was going to answer her question. To clarify, the lease that I believe Mrs. Opelka is just referring to is a long-term lease from our current tenant,
Correct.
Not bond versus lease, just to be clear.
Right. Thank you. Right. And it would be nice to hear from the Budget Committee on that.
Mr. Guillen.
I'm sorry, if you could repeat a specific question, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for.
Is there any position that, do you have any concern about the low rent that is being charged and that we're not going to be recouping this major renovation?
That was discussed throughout the process and following the public hearing. However, the Budget Committee recommended this article 4-3.
4 to 3. So are there anybody in opposition who wants to?
3 people, but we don't have a minority position presentation. That's not our. The relationship with the SAU governing board to set the rate for payment is the prerogative of the school board. The budget committee advises. We have no direct role in that other than advising the school board.
Mr. Hyde.
So this is one of the reasons that the plot thickens is the.
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
Let me try that. So this is one of the reasons that the plot thickens is that the aspect of how to secure longer-term commitment of a contract to pay amongst the sending school districts is the issue. And therefore, when you consider the backdrop of the hassles that we've had repeatedly at the co-op and other things, as a matter of fact, I think tonight on Brookline's town meeting, they're considering a article for withdrawal from the co-op. This will go on and create uncertainty. To address that was one of the issues that we talked about in our meetings with the school board. I think in concept there's a lot of agreement, but we couldn't get there in time. So with that as backdrop, I'm going to offer the following amendment to Article 1. And it's in the spirit of trying to address assurance that we have the existing districts paying for and obligated to pay for, at least in portion, part of the costs of this. And so the amendment that we've crafted is as follows. And so has the wording down through the 2/3 vote required, or maybe just before the 2/3 vote required, and then inserting the following addition. This expenditure is to be allowed only if the following conditions are met before the bond is issued. A binding long-term lease agreement for the term of the lease plus 1 year is adopted by the SAU governing board, having attained majorities as required by law, to lease the 4 Lund Road, Hollis, New Hampshire building for use as the SAU 41 building from the Hollis School District at terms agreed upon as described in Part B below, among others deemed important by the Hollis School Board. B, lease payments for each sending district will cover the bond payments in full over the course of the bond term and will be apportioned to each sending district on the basis of SAU apportionment formula, currently 50% EV, 50% ADM. That's the amendment. I'll give this to the clerk in a moment. Essentially, what you have to realize is that the notion around how apportionment goes within the SAU is set by RSA, and that's a 50-50 under current law. So as was described accurately, I think, by Mr. Mann before, is that regardless of what happens, we're going to have about 60-some-odd% of that obligation, and Brookline will have the balance, so long as they remain. Should they decide 2 years, 4 years, 8 years down the road that they would like to get up and skedaddle elsewhere, or that they don't like this and we want to go to a different SAU building, we're still on the hook for the bond because we are the owning district. And this helps to assure that there's obligation, skin in the game, and a cure to remedy that side of things. So that's why I'm offering the amendment, and I hope it passes. Did it get a second?
Seconded by Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Could I have the text, please? Can I read your writing?
Can I have the legible text, please?
Is it?
Oh, sorry.
Didn't hit anybody. Is there discussion on the amendment?
Yes, sir. Hi, my name is Susan Hummel. I live on Mendelssohn. I've appreciated a lot of the technical discussion tonight on this issue, the one thing that I have, the one question I have, and it's a bit of a simpler question. As I understand it, the tax revenue that is collected in Hollis, almost 80% of that goes to the school. And if I understand what I've listened to tonight, this renovation has been needed a long time coming. You don't have space, don't have facilities. My question to you as a resident of Hollis is, if this is your your biggest priority, why are we talking about all these other articles? If this has been your biggest priority, why are we talking about raises? Why are we talking about some of these other nickel and dime costs? Why are we talking about almost $100,000 in unforeseen expenses? I mean, the reality is the residents of Hollis aren't a cash cow for anything you guys want to do, and it's very frustrating to be a resident and know that so much of the tax revenue is going to school expenses, and then it just turns into a never-ending laundry list of wants. I appreciate that you want to get this done, and I understand that there's probably a need. If that's a need, that needs to be your priority. And you really have to look at the other wish list of things that you're proposing. The funds are limited for everybody. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Barbara King, Barton Road. Is that amendment, is it legal? Can we obligate other school districts, other entities to have to pay this lease if we put this amendment in? Second time you have to get up now.
Yes, or no, I don't know. So look, I saw the amendment like a half an hour ago. Yeah. It's a long amendment, and there are a lot of components to the amendment. My ability to do a legal analysis and look at all the laws that apply to cooperative school districts and multi-district SAUs on the fly like this is severely limited. I don't want to give you guys half legal advice. It's really not what lawyers do. What I can say is it's legal for the legislative body to amend warrant articles. That's perfectly legal. What may end up happening is this warrant article may end up creating a situation where the governing body, the board, may not be able to go out and issue a bond because the conditions for issuing the bond are impossible to meet. And my ability to tell you whether that's the case or not, I can't do it here. I just don't have enough time to do that analysis. What I can tell you is that when there's been this concept of the SAU maybe splitting up in Brookline or Hollis.
The co-op splitting up.
So to me, I just want to say to the group, there's a difference between the cooperative splitting up and the SAU splitting up, and they're not the same thing. So they're all currently in the same SAU, and if there was a circumstance where a district, like let's say Brookline withdrew from the co-op, and that split up, they would still be in SAU 41 until they withdrew from SAU 41. When they withdrew from SAU 41, it is required in RSA 194C that they have to create a plan, and the plan has to state how they will remain obligated for outstanding obligations, debts, and liabilities. Having gone through that process, I know that the State Board of Education would fully expect that anybody withdrawing for the SAU would account for what their ongoing obligation would be to the districts that remain in the SAU for financial debt, capital improvements, stuff like this. Other than that, I can't provide a clear answer because I haven't done a legal analysis of the amendment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Fareed.
Tammy Fareed, where do I live? Winding Valley Road. I want to make clear to voters that the SAU cannot own property. So the only way, and I'm not sure everyone understands, the SAU governing board is made up of the Hollis School Board, the Brookline School Board, and the Co-op School Board. So that's 5, 5, and 7. And all of us together, 17, oversee the operations of the SAU and 2 major contracts, which is the superintendent's contract and the bus contract. We don't make decisions for the SAU operations at the Hollis School Board level just because we own the building. When Chris Hyde talked about if the SAU decides to skedaddle,
we still own the property. So while he's 100% right, if the SAU board were to vote for the SAU operations, the administration, to move shop, that Andy Corey cannot decide that the SAU operations are going to move. Only the SAU governing board can authorize that. I believe that's correct. So we would still be, but if that happened, we would still be owning that property. The bond would be ours to pay alone, it's true. And the asset is 100% ours. Brookline can't own part of it. This is our real estate property. And so this is the conundrum. You know, our district is made of a Venn diagram kind of thing, where there's the SAU, the co-op, the Hollis, the Brookline schools, and we're all overseen by SAU 41. It makes it difficult to parse it all out, but you've got to stay clear. Four-Lund Lane belongs to Hollis. Taxpayers own it, and we administer it through the school district. And the SAU's operations are overseen by 17 people on the governing board. The staff is not allowed to make decisions as to where they're going to rent on their own.
Thank you. Mr. Butow.
Yeah, I guess my question on this amendment is, and it's not whether it's legal to pass such a modified article, but let's assume we pass this modified article, and in fact, we then run into a problem with issuing the bond. Is that then the end of it? What happens in that case?
Good question.
So just so people understand what the process is with a bond article, because I think there's a lot of ideas about how this works. We're not really what we're concerned about and what the bond bank requires is an opinion from bond counsel saying that everything was done lawfully and the board has the authority to issue the bond on behalf of the district, right? And so you need bond counsel to write that bond opinion. The bond counsel in this case is my partner, Greg M. He's going to read this Warren article and he's going to say, Jim, what the heck does this mean with this amendment? And I'm going to say, I don't really know. And we're going to have to figure out whether it's legal or not. And at the end of the day, it's his liability insurance that's on the line in writing the bond opinion that allows the board to issue the bond. And if it's sufficiently unclear, he's just not going to write the opinion. That's the risk we're talking about. You will probably not be able to get a bond opinion if it's too convoluted and if you set conditions that aren't able to be met.
Understand. So then if that opinion does not get written or not favorably written or whatever, and that implies that the bond will not be issued because nobody will let a bond without a covering opinion, then what happens?
Nothing.
Okay.
It's the same as the article having not passed.
Thank you. Okay,
that's the board has no authority to move forward and issue the bond.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was sort of clear.
Mr. Harmon.
Hi, Bill Harmon, 106 North Pepperell in Hollis. I have a quick question about procedure before. Are we at the moment where we're considering the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So it seems to me that if we're going to put this money in a renovation into a building, that we should have a commitment from whoever's going to lease the building or use the building to do so. And it was mentioned that Hollis will own the building in any event, but we may not want the building to look like it looks if it's renovated, if it's not going to be used for the use intended. So it seems to me it's, if I were investing my money, I would want some commitment from the tenants as to what they were going to pay towards paying off, via rent, if you will, the bond, since Hollis is making the commitment. So I guess I'm in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Opaka.
Bill Opalika. I'm going to move the question on the amendment.
Is that right? Moving the question on, second by Ms. Fareed.
Can I speak before
Yes. Ms. Roy asked to speak before that.
Great. I wanted to offer some information about what the amendment would mean in numbers. We've talked about the current rental rate is $4.27. We are going to be increasing the net square footage of the building through this renovation to about 8,300 square feet. So that alone will mean more money coming in from the rental rate just as it is. The amendment very specifically was talking about covering the bond 100%. In order to cover the bond 100%, that rental rate would have to be about $14 per square foot. So that would be an almost threefold increase of what is there right now. The commercial square, actually more than that, excuse me. The commercial square foot rate that you will find just out there to go get a commercial space is approximately $11 dollars per square foot. So we're talking about needing to charge $3 more per square foot for a space than our current tenant, the SAU, could go get a different space. And then what's happening is we as Hollis residents are paying 60% of that cost as members of the SAU to another landlord where we have no control over the building and we have no stake in ownership in the facility. So I wanted you guys to know exactly what those rate numbers look like if you were to adopt this amendment. Does anybody have any questions on those numbers? Now, we have already been considering and talking about the long-term lease and the rent increases as a board. That has to go through the SAU governing board, which meets approximately 4 times per year. So time-wise, we're not even sure that this could be satisfied in the time frame that this amendment requires as well.
A question, not an opinion, please.
Yes, a question. So the question is, you asked if there was questions around the figures. It will raise I'll believe your numbers. I think they're likely to be very close to right. However, if we leave the rent lower, who's going to pay the difference between that? It means that the Hollis taxpayers are actually going to pay even more for this renovation plus lease without any security going forward to the security of sharing the payments for this. Is that true?
I mean, yeah. Yeah. We own the building. We're the
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
let's cut off the debate at this point.
Thank you for
We
indulging my numbers.
Yes, information. Mr. Redstrom.
If we can't build a competitive building on municipal bond rates, maybe we should rent from the private sector and sell the farmhouse.
That's not exactly a point of information. We are voting on the amendment, which reads as follows. To follow up there where it says 2/3 vote required, this expenditure is to be allowed only if the following conditions are met before the bond is issued. A binding long-term lease agreement for the term of the lease plus 1 year is adopted by the SAU governing board, having attained majorities as required by law to lease the 4 Lund Lane, Hollis, New Hampshire building for use as the SAU 41 building from the Hollis School District at terms agreed upon as described in Part B below, among others deemed important by the Hollis School Board. B, lease payments for each spending district, lease payments for each sending district will cover the bond payments in full over the course of the bond term and will be apportioned to each sending district on the basis of SAU apportionment formula of 50% EV, 50% ADM. This is an amendment, only requires a simple majority. If you are in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. If you are opposed to the amendment, please raise your cards. Let's count this one, please. Put your cards down. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your cards. Okay, thank you. The vote was 22 in the affirmative, 32 in the negative. The amendment fails. Mr. Butow.
I would like to move the question on Article 1.
Moving the question on Article 1. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Fareed. All in favor of ending debate on Article 1, please raise your cards. Correct. All opposed, raise your cards. The motion to end debate passes. Now, this is a secret, because it's a bond issue, it is a secret ballot vote, and the polls need to remain open for at least an hour. You should all have received from the ballot clerk when you checked in a pink yes or no ballot. After you have marked your ballot and put it in the box, you can go back to the ballot clerks and get a second ballot for, we will have another vote on the SAU budget when we get to it. The polls are now open. What?
I'm not sure it's a legitimate one. We did not discuss this article. We discussed the sense of the meeting, we had a motion to table, and we had a motion to amend. We did not discuss the main article.
But a legal motion to end debate. We are voting. The polls are now open. We had a fair discussion. He made a legal motion to end debate. This is an hour-long thing. I will keep the polls open until at least 10:20, so that will satisfy the 1 hour requirement. Since Article 2 depends on the result of Article 1, without objection, I will proceed on to Article 5. We are resuming the meeting. There we go. No, there it is. Okay. Article 5. To see if the Hollis School District will vote to approve the cost items included in the 3-year collective bargaining agreement reached between the Hollis School Board and the Hollis Education Support Staff Association for the 2020 to 21 school year, which calls for the following increases in support staff salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels. For fiscal year 2020 to 21, the estimated increase is $50,432. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,432 for the fiscal year, such sum representing the negotiated increase over the 2019 to 20 salaries and fringe benefits. The school board recommends this 400. The budget committee recommends this 700. The estimated tax impact is 3 cents a thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Fareed.
As the slide shows you, this is the second year of a 3-year agreement with our support staff. Support staff includes custodians, school secretaries, food service workers, and para-educators. There are approximately 55 members under this contract. Last year, you approved the first year of a 3-year contract that was not San Bernized, meaning that each year of the contract, we bring it before you in a separate warrant article. In San Bernized contracts, it's always embedded after the first year into the operating budget. As you see, the cost this year, net for fiscal year 21, is $50,432. These are the essential adjustments in the 3-year contract. I repeat, you are only voting tonight on the FY21 year of the 3-year agreement. Essentially, the agreement is for 3 years. No changes in caps on employer premiums to medical insurance. No changes to membership to the low-cost health plan that everyone in the district now belongs to. We had many, many goals when we negotiated this contract for management rights, and achieved everything that was our highest priority. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. And you can see from the table that the contract includes a step awarded on the step table every year. Last year, this current year, I beg your pardon, was a 0.5% increase. FY21 would be a 0.5% increase. That's what we'll be voting on tonight. FY22 is also a 0.5% increase to those on the step table. For those employees in the contract who are off step, that means they have been here more years than the table covers, then the increases are 3% this current year, 3% in the FY21 year that we'll be voting on, and 3.5% for FY22. I'd like to point out that in the 1-year contract that preceded this 3-year contract, the increase was $58,000 as negotiated. So we were able in this contract over the 3 years, each year's increase is less than 2 years ago. This is a long list of the majority of the elements that we achieved. This was shown also during the public hearing on our warrant. We were very happy with the the contract the way it was structured, and we believe that the staff is also best served by the many changes that were made. Again, contract is not standardized. Each year of the 3-year agreement must be approved by the voters. We present next year the same way as we're presenting this year. And as you can see there, the total of the 3 years is $156,000. The incremental 51, 50, and 55,000. As I said, the previous 1-year contract had a $58,000 increase, so we were pleased with also being able to control costs across this contract. Oops, excuse me. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on Article 5?
I'd like to move the question. Joanne,
The motion is to end debate, although if there isn't any discussion, you don't need a motion to end debate. Is there a second on ending debate? Sorry, yes, ma'am, what was your name?
Lager, Shedlane. Joanne.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hyde. All in favor of ending debate, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. We're going to move to voting on Article 5. All in favor of Article 5, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. And the motion carries. Article 6. This is the SAU budget, which is another ballot vote. This one, however, doesn't require that you be open for an hour. When we get to voting, we will be using the tan cards that you just, gray, I guess you call this color, that you just got from the ballot clerks, and we'll be putting them in a different ballot box. Article 6, shall the district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $553,385 as the Hollis School District's portion of the SAU budget of $1,807,100 for the forthcoming fiscal year. This year's adjusted budget of $1,718,104 with $533,214 assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in this school administrative unit. The school budget recommends this 4-0-0. The budget committee recommends it 6-1-0. The estimated net tax impact is 32 cents a thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Fareed, do you wish to speak to it?
Folks, people are telling me to speak up louder. I'm very uncomfortable on the microphone. I'd rather shout at you directly, but if I'm too loud, please let me know. SAU budget. As you know from previous comments, the SAU budget has to be voted on in Hollis, in Brookline, and at the co-op. So it is the aggregation of all those votes that will determine whether this article passes. We cannot amend this article on the floor. Our portion of the FY21 SAU budget, as you see, is $553,385. I need the clicker, please. Thank you. The default budget would be a little bit less. This is the makeup of our proposal. If you can look at the FY20 budget, the current budget is $1.73 million. The proposed budget is $1.8 million. The change is $75,000 and change, and the bulk of that is a single item that we'll get to here in a minute. And when we get to it, there will be further details. So give us a chance to present it to you quickly, and then, of course, your questions are welcome. If you look at the table below, the large table, you'll see on the far left budget drivers, change from FY20, and details. Salaries is the first item, total $37,333. We have 3% contractual agreement increases in some of our senior administrators. We have our employees, the recommendation of the superintendent and other supervisors is for a 3% increase. Our HR coordinator of many years has qualified for a senior position and has been promoted to, has been qualified as an administrator, and we are proposing to promote her. I'm sorry, I lost my word there. We have a hiring contingency line item, which if you'll please give me a moment, I will explain to you in a minute. You can see the total of that is $37,333. Second item is benefits. That's all in for the entire SAU staff as well as for a proposed position I'll get to in just a moment. You can see health insurance GMR is 4.1% increase. GMR stands for guaranteed maximum rate. For the purposes of budgeting in the fall, when we do this, November, December, January, the insurance companies give us the maximum increase we can expect. Sometimes it comes in a lot less in the spring when they finally publish it. Sometimes it's on target, but it won't be higher than that. Dental insurance is also approximately 4%, 3.9%. It's a little higher than in previous years. It's a lot lower than most of the most recent years. So we're not thrilled, but we're not also in pain over a 4% increase. I want to jump to the last item because the third item, the new position, facilities director, requires a little explanation, and I think we'll end up asking Superintendent Corey to come up and speak to that. The last item is Student Services Transition Coordinator. Last year, we asked you to please authorize a budget that included a one-year contract for an individual who was transitioning from one job to another, and we needed that person to stay with us to train some of a new senior staff position that has a great deal of responsibility. That contract ends June 30 as we promised, and therefore for FY21, which starts July 1, you'll see there's parentheses there, the budget benefits by $54,000. We saved the amount that was on that contract. It is not part of this coming year's budget. The new position, facilities director. The proposed salary is $66,500. The SAU budget subcommittee is made up of representatives from Brookline, Hollis, and the co-op. That included Mike Harris from the budget committee. That included me because this year I'm the elected treasurer of the SAU governing board. It included Amy Kellner, as the representative from the Hollis School Board per se, and numerous others. The administration proposed the salary that you see. The subcommittee was concerned that that might not be enough in the tight hiring market to attract the kind of qualified individual that we desperately need. And so the administration wouldn't budge and we wouldn't budge. So the compromise was the contingency, the hiring contingency item that you see under salaries. That's a $10,000 line item that will not be expended if it's not necessary, and the administration continues to feel that the proposed salary of $66,500 will be adequate to attract a strongly qualified individual. I think really this element should be described to you by our superintendent, but I would like to witness to you that we desperately need this position.
Mr. Corey.
We are seeking a facilities director for the SAU to manage the 7 buildings that we maintain. As you've seen, most of our buildings are aging. Many of them are 20 years or older, and as a result, we need more focus on those items. Presently, Kelly Seeley is the business manager, and I share these responsibilities. I think what's outlined up there is fine, but I will tell you the firsthand example of where this position would be helpful. I think we're all well aware of what's going on with COVID-19. That has required us to sterilize, disinfect, and address our buildings in a very unique way over the last 10 days. Kelly and I oversee our maintenance staff as well as this whole disinfecting process. So really, as a result of the efforts we needed to put in, because student safety will always come first, educationally, on occasion, my responsibility changes and my primary role takes a back seat, as well as Kelly's does, because we move into safety pieces. I think it's prudent as a taxpayer to have this position. I think over time it will pay for itself. I think they will bring a level of expertise that will assist us, and it will also provide us what I would call SAU buying power. And I'll give you one example. We were able to coordinate one project across the SAU where we put safety film on all first floor windows so somebody with an object could not break the window and jump into children. Because we were able to do that through Kelly's leadership across the SAU, we got a much better price. And we believe with this new position can do that on a regular basis, and as I said, pay for itself.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this article? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. As far as I know, there are no further ballot votes planned. We will pick up this meeting as soon as everybody is voted with Article 7. The the polls are now open for Article 6. Please use the gray ballot and put them in the other box. Article 6. Hurry up and vote, please. Article 6.
I take back what I said before.
Well,
I told him
I want you people to stop to learn how to make it shorter.
I did. I made my answer short. Oh no. And the NBA just canceled the game. No, I think they canceled the game.
Is there anybody in the room still waiting to vote on Article 6? Yes?
Tom, do you need a call? Tomas?
Are we ready to close the polls on Article 6?
On Article 6 I can, as soon as they're done voting. Yeah.
Well, we're going to pick up the meeting anyway while we're still waiting for people to vote on Article 6. Now, I'm good now. Just one, just one. All right, the polls are closed on Article 6. While they count, we will continue on with Article 7. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate up to the sum of $23,970 to be added to the previously established maintenance fund for administrative and associated structures at 4 Lund Lane in Hollis, map 56, lot 2. This amount to come from the unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1 of this year. This amount represents rental proceeds and unexpected maintenance funds to be received from SAU 41. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 700. The estimated net tax impact is 0. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Roy.
Background, this is the rental income from 4 Lund Lane, which of course we have discussed at length tonight. This is the expendable trust, is basically a savings account so we can take care of the building. The funding comes directly from that rental income, and it is simply covers major expenditures proposed by the administration. Do you need me to do that? Which one?
Point it over there. No.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you. We do evaluate and present plan to BudCom for their input when there are instances of needing to use the fund. The FY21 projected opening balance is $32,526. FY21 proposed funding is $23,970. There are no proposed projects in FY21, and so the projected FY21 ending balance is $56,496.
Is there any discussion on Article 7? Ms. Fareed.
I definitely support this article. I am here, however, to interrupt. Oh, you guys! First you tell me to talk less, and then you tell me to talk more. So I'm interrupting, Carol, and I'm sorry. I'd like to restrict reconsideration on Articles 1 through 4.
Article 1 is not done voting yet. Article 2 hasn't been brought up.
Okay.
So you can do.
All right. First, you're right. I'm so sorry. I've gotten ahead of myself.
3 and 4.
I would like to restrict reconsideration of Articles 3 and 4.
Okay. Motion to restrict reconsideration of Articles 3 and 4, moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Mann. All in if there is any discussion of restricting reconsideration? All in favor of restricting reconsideration Articles 3 and 4, raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. Articles 3 and 4 are restricted.
Mr. Moderator, may I make another motion?
Yes?
I'd like to restrict reconsideration of Article 5, the contract, the support staff contract.
Not yet, because they're still counting. Oh, sorry, that's the CBA. Yes.
The CBA.
Motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 5.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Roy. Is there any discussion? All in favor of restricting reconsideration on 5, raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. And the motion carries.
On Article 2, I have a procedural question.
Yes.
Can we move to pass over Article 2 for tonight? Is that relevant, or do we need to?
At such time as we know the vote on Article 1, that such a motion would be in order. Mr. Garuba.
Since this maintenance fund is related to the improvements that we just voted on, I move that we table this article until we know the outcome of the vote.
The vote on which article?
Article 3.
On the lease.
On the bond issue. So you want, the motion is to table this article until we know the result of the bond issue. Is that what you're?
Can I
No.
get some detail?
I believe it was a lease on the upgrades to this building. I want to know the
lease. Article 1 is a bond issue.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. The motion is to table this Article 7 until we know the results of Article 1.
May I reply?
However, there is a further conflict because Article 2 is there pending, depending on what happens with Article 1. So if Article 1 fails, do you want to take up this then, or do you want to take up Article 2 next? What is your motion intending?
I'd like to take up this after the results of Article 1.
Okay, so the motion is to table this until after Article 1, but before Article 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a second?
May I provide detail?
Second by Mr. Harmon. Ms. Roy.
The detail is we already have the money. We have to do this as a procedural thing. It's the rental income, it's moving it into a fund. That is the only thing. So this isn't what we're going to do with it. Just like with the renovated building, if Article 1 passes and the renovation moves forward, all of that rental income goes into, we will ask each year to keep that in a fund. And how that is handled and dispersed is dependent upon the plan that moves forward with the rent and the maintenance plans on the building, which obviously if the renovation passes will be much less than what it is in existence now. So this is just us taking the rental income and putting it into a fund so it can therefore roll over.
Okay, so if this were to fail, the money would remain in the unassigned fund balance and be available for other purposes. Is that correct?
If this fails, is it sitting in the unassigned fund balance available for something else? Can you say that? It will lapse. I'm going to have the lawyer address that because it's a legal consideration. The lawyer, that's capital T, capital L.
Yeah, this is, I think it's unanticipated revenue. So at the end of the fiscal year, it would lapse back to offset the tax rate. I don't think the board could spend this money without legislative body approval. So it would just lapse to offset next year's tax rate.
Okay, so it wouldn't remain in the unassigned fund balance. It would actually offset everyone's taxes next year.
Unassigned fund balance that isn't expended at the close of the fiscal year is it just offsets next year's appropriation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Corey.
So this is the money that's allocated to the 3 districts. We had a discussion earlier about asking the SAU to look at reviewing the lease. If the Hollis district was to start voting against this article and it went back as a surplus to them, I would never be able to get the SAU to look at a larger lease. Because again, this $23,000 would come back to you, you're absolutely correct. But it's part of the Brookline rent, it's part of the co-op rent, and it's part of the Hollis rent. So I just wanted to be clear, this is not money that is just Hollis paying into this.
So the motion is to table this article until after Article 1 and before Article 2. This is a tabling, requires 2/3 vote. All in favor of tabling, please raise your cards. All opposed, raise your cards. Motion fails. Is there discussion on Article 7? Seeing none, all in favor of Article 7, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. The ayes have it. Article 8. To see if the school district will vote to raise, I have the results on Article 6. The vote was yes, 36, no, 26. The SAU appropriation vote will be combined with the Brookline School District vote, which was yesterday, and the co-op vote, which will be next week. Article 8. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate up to the sum of $120,000 to be added to the previously established School Buildings Maintenance Fund from the Hollis School District's June 30, 2020 unassigned fund balance, available for transfer on July 1, 2020. School Board recommends 400. The Budget Committee recommends 700. The estimated tax impact is that if this article passes, the voters would forego a potential rate reduction of 9 cents per thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Arthur.
Thank you. Mrs. Helwig. Okay. So the purpose of the School Building Maintenance Fund is that it is a savings account to carry forward funds for major building maintenance, and it is funded by the unreserved funds balance surplus. Expenditures are proposed by the administration, and the school board body evaluates and presents a plan to the Budget Committee for input, and the school board does make final approval of expenditures. So the opening balance for the already established School Buildings Maintenance Fund, you can see there on the first line, is $110,701. The proposed funding for 2021 is $120,000, which would again come from the unreserved fund balance surplus. So there would be no additional tax increase if you're voting yes on this. And there's a list of proposed projects here that you can have a look at and possibly have questions on, but I'm not going to read through them. The total project's cost, you can see on the second to last line, is $127,000, which means that the projected ending balance for the School Buildings Maintenance Fund would be $103,701. Are there any questions?
Any discussion on Article 8? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. If you are in favor of appropriating $120,000 for the School Buildings Maintenance Fund, please raise your cards. Thank you. If you are opposed, please raise your cards. And the motion passes.
Motion is to restrict reconsideration of Articles 7 and 8. Moved by Ms. Mann, seconded by Mr. Harris. Any discussion? All in favor of restricting reconsideration of Articles 7 and 8, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. And the ayes have it. Article 9. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate up to the sum of $25,000 to be added to the previously established Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. The sum will come from the Hollis School District's June 30, 2020 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1, 2020. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 700. The estimated net tax impact would be to forego a potential rate reduction of 2 cents a thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Arthur.
Thank you. This is a savings account that was created for the Hollis School District last year. It's existed longer in the Hollis Brookline School District and the Brookline School District. And we saw prudent to create one in Hollis as well. So it would be to carry funds for major unexpected special education costs, which can arise. And there's some examples here. The use of the trust would lessen the risk of ongoing educational programs, that ongoing educational programs would be reduced to fund unforeseen special education costs that cannot be avoided. We're gradually funding it from the unassigned fund balance, the same place that the previous warrant article is also funded from. There's a trust balance non-statutory cap of $280,000. Oh, I guess that's the last slide. So there is currently $25,000 in the fund, and is that correct? I hope I'm saying the right thing there. Am I saying the right thing? Yes, nodding, yes, okay. And we are looking for the transfer of an additional $25,000.
Is there any discussion on Article 9? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. If you are in favor of appropriating $25,000 for the Special Education Expendable Trust Fund, please raise your cards. Thank you. If you are opposed, raise your cards. And the ayes have it. Article 10. To see if the school district will vote to establish a contingency fund for the current year for unanticipated expenses that may arise, and further to raise and appropriate a sum of $95,000 to go into the fund, this sum to be raised by taxation. Any appropriation left in the fund at the end of the year will lapse to the general fund. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 700. The estimated net tax impact is 5 cents a thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Roy.
This is a standard article that we present every year. The contingency fund is exactly that. It is to smooth out any extra unexpected demands that we may have, kind of as a shock absorber for those unknown expenses. An example of how it's been used in the past is when we had a boom in enrollment for kindergarten and we needed to add a 5th teacher. This was able to make up a few $1,000s that couldn't be taken from the operating budget. At the expiration of the year, you'll see it lapses back into the general fund and goes back to you. Thus the reason we ask for it each year. Thank you. Gotcha. Oh, and specifically the reason why we do this every year is because we are a school district and we have to. We cannot keep this money over. It goes back. Thank you.
Any discussion on Article 10? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. If you are in favor of establishing the contingency fund for the year and appropriating $95,000, please raise your cards. Thank you. If you are opposed, please raise your cards. Thank you, and the ayes have it. Article 11. To see if the school district voters will authorize the Hollis School District to access future year state and federal special education aid funds in the event that special education costs exceed budget limitations. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 700. The estimated net tax impact is 0. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Fareed.
This used to be called catastrophic aid. It is an annual eternal article that authorizes the school district to accept funds from the state in the event that we have a highly unanticipated, very significant special ed cost emerge unexpectedly. The distinction between this and the trust I always like to explain is that we have to apply to the state. We never get the full, a payment for the full difference, and it's always delayed by approximately 18 months, where if we had, the trust allows us to work with the budget committee and the voters to access funds immediately if we had a really significant increase suddenly. Thank you.
Any discussion on Article 11? Seeing none, all in favor of authorizing the district to access special education funds, raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, raise your cards. And the ayes have it. Just trucking along here. Article 12. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $13,264,874 for the support of schools, for the payment of salaries for the school district officials and agents, and for the payment of statutory obligations of the district. This appropriation does not include appropriations voted in any other warrant articles. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 700. The estimated net tax impact is $7.61 a thousand. Moved by Mr. Harris, seconded by Mr. Mann. Mr. Guillen.
Each year in the school district and in the town, the budget committee offers guidance to the school board and the selectmen respectively, considering economic conditions, current obligations, and so forth, and ask them to come in with a specific budget number. You can see the comparison of the two numbers there, the guidance budget and the proposed budget. The school board and administration actually presented a budget that came in $2 under the request of the budget committee, so we're appreciative of that collegial effort there. All right, first topic we always cover is the effect on headcount, because people want to know, rightly so I think, how is this going to affect the students' experience? What's the staffing composition going to look like in the coming year? I'll go right to the bottom to start with. This budget, if approved, would add 2.8 staff members to the Hollis School District headcount. And breaking them down here, at the risk of just reading this off, you see that we've got, we're adding an existing position for a special ed teacher that was vacant. We're adding an additional intensive needs teacher and an occupational therapist. That occupational therapist increases existing a half part-time to a full-time position. A tenth of an SAU administrator, and 2 regular education support staff, 1 for kindergarten paraeducator and 1 for an instructional assistant. That is offset to some degree by a reduction of 1.8 in special education support staff associated with some specific students moving out of the Hollis School District and into the co-op. major increases, I'll cover the major increases and decreases. You'll see a number of these. In fact, the first three of the first five are special education related. Recall a couple articles ago when we funded, in addition to the special education trust fund, this budget that we're contemplating in fiscal year 21 actually has an increase of $450,000 associated with special education costs. The special education costs are highly variable and really depend on the specific needs of the specific students. So in any given year, they can fluctuate substantially. That's one of the rationales for, or justifications for having that trust fund. In that, the administration is aware of an increased need in the coming budget. We wouldn't tap into that trust fund. The notion of the trust fund is for example, mid-year transfers. A student comes in with substantial needs that we didn't anticipate and couldn't budget for. That's when it would be more appropriate to use the trust fund. In that we know that we're going to have increased special education costs, we are budgeting for them. Out of district tuition, a 100% increase of almost $120,000. Out of district is exactly that. We have circumstances from time to time where we have a student for which we're obligated to provide educational services has needs that cannot be met within the buildings in our district. And the student is placed in a school outside of the district, and we have to pay tuition. Associated with tuition is transportation. That can be very substantial given potential distances or special equipment or whatever might be required to satisfy the education needs. Another significant increase is speech pathology, hiring versus contracting. We're bringing that in-house, and I think we're going to see an offset on the next slide. More special education costs, an increase in pre-K, and then healthcare insurance, an increase of $49,000, or about 5% in the increase of the employer portion of those costs. We get some relief in some areas, cataloging the major decreases. I touched on this in the staffing on the very first slide. We have special education salaries because of reducing by almost $90,000 because of some students moving out of the school district and into the middle school. The barn study design, last year, the school district spent $64,500 on the study behind the plan that was presented this evening. That was a one-time cost, so that went away. Contracted speech services, special education coordinator, day tank replacement. Remind me, is that the water system? Boiler? Boiler, okay. Right, so it's related to building maintenance. And I believe that is the extent of the comments. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on Article 12? Seeing none, it is time to vote on Article 12. All in favor of the $13+ million budget, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your cards. And the budget passes with a card vote. It is almost time to close the ballots, the voting on Article 1, but not quite. Motion is to restrict reconsideration on Articles 9, 10, and 11, 12. Seconded by Ms. Roy. What? All in favor of restricting reconsideration on Articles 9, 10, 11, and 12? Thank you. All opposed? And the motion passes. All right, it has been an hour, so we are closing the polls on Article 1.
And since everything else is pending for that count, we will stay in recess until we have the count. I have the vote on Article 1. Yes is 31, no is 44, and the article fails. Article 2.
Can we go back to the slide for Article 2, please?
What?
The slide for Article 2 as you read it. Thank you.
In the event that Article 1 is not approved, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of $250,000 to stabilize the barn foundation and frame at 4 Lund Lane in Hollis. The school board recommends 400. The budget committee recommends 430. The net tax impact is 18 cents a thousand. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Ms. Roy. Ms. Fareed.
Mr. Moderator, Chair of the School Board, Chair of the Budget Committee, no one is more passionately in favor of the project for the 4 Lund Lane project than I am, except for our chair. And it hurts me to say, but I move to pass over Article 2 in light of all of the confusion and difficulties related to this bond.
Motion is to pass over Article 2. Moved by Ms. Fareed, seconded by Mr. Mann. If we pass over Article 2 and then adjourn, then the article is dead until next year. Is there any discussion on passing over?
I would like to comment since I know all about it, and that is that the architect and a barn specialist and other experts in foundations have examined this barn. They've recommended the foundation changes that are in this article and that were in Article 1. However, they made clear they are not advising us that the barn is in any imminent danger of collapse at this time and do not expect it to be in any such danger for the coming year.
Further discussion on passing over Article 2? Seeing none, all in favor of passing over Article 2, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? And the motion is passed over. Article 13, any other business? I hear a move to adjourn by Mr. Harris, seconded by Mr. Guillen. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? And we are adjourned. Dissolved, actually.